Thank you all again for coming this evening. This is our fourth, you can't see my fingers because of the screen, but our fourth in a series of six. We've got our Growing for the Greater Good, which is our biophilia in the community. We have two wonderful speakers this evening, which I'm very excited about. Carolyn Quinn, as well as Jeanette and Koma Say. Let me know if I mispronounced anything. But really excited to be talking about getting our hands dirty, reconnecting with nature, as well as how this can not only benefit our community, but also benefit ourselves. So I appreciate you all tuning in and participating. Quick explanation on the structure for this evening. So we'll have two presentations. Jeanette will have a video posting and presentation, and I'll do an introduction here in a second. And then after Jeanette, we'll have Carolyn present. If you have questions, it's best to just put it in the chat. There's a little chat feature at the bottom. If you haven't been stuck on Zooms like I have, quick explanation, just go to the bottom and type your question in there. I'll be pulling all of those together so that at the end of the two presentations, when we're able to actually have some Q&A, I'll just go through those questions and ask them accordingly to whoever the recipient should be. So thank you again, I appreciate that. And I would be remiss, let's see if I didn't highlight, so this series is part of, as I mentioned, this presentation this evening is part of a series. We do have our Eco Action Arlington Earth Day Challenge currently taking place. There's a corresponding slide which Eleanor will post up here momentarily. But right now we are trying to raise money. Every dollar is matching. We're trying to raise $15,000 before the end of the month. And every dollar is matching through the end of the month. So if you like what you see and you want more of it, your money is greatly appreciated to support these types of presentations because they do take time and we do have a staff. So thank you. Quick shout out to our sponsors who helped make this possible. Amazon, JBG Smith, Eagle Bank, Farrow & Farrow Graphic Communication, Northwest Federal Credit Union, and OLA Consulting. Thank you all. This would not be possible without your support. So really appreciate it. And then, as I mentioned, the kind of the end of our series on biophilia is our third annual Eco Extravaganza celebration. This will be taking place virtually. We're working on some kinks to potentially have some sort of experience that might not be limited to just looking at a Zoom. So stay tuned as that information comes out and as we start to refine it. I know we don't have a ton of time, but we're working diligently to try and come up with something that would be special and safe. But stay tuned for that. We will also have a presenter for that. I don't know if I can announce that, Eleanor. Can I announce our presenter yet? We're getting a no. So stay tuned. We got a great presenter there too. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our two speakers, and then Jeanette will have her video followed by Carolyn's presentation. So Jeanette is a horticulturist, designer, and educator who believes in simple terms that plants in landscapes make the world a better place. Jeanette is a licensed landscape architect and holds a Bachelor in Science in Horticulture and a Master's in Landscape Architecture from Cornell University. She teaches and lectures on the intersection of horticulture, ecology, agriculture through her courses taught at George Washington University and formerly with the Sustainable Landscapes program. Super fortunate to have her here this evening. She also does some work with the county, which we're excited to have her speak to her kind of diverse experience. Carolyn Quinn is the owner and operator of Duggan Farms, an 8-acre produce and flower farm located between Whitestone and Kilmarnock. Did I pronounce it correctly? Okay, great. And you can correct me later. in Virginia, down on the eastern or northern neck, excuse me. She moved to the Northern Neck from Washington, D.C., where she was a government relations executive specializing in defense and homeland security research and development policy. She shares her farmhouse with her beloved Australian cattle dog, Doug. So I think she'll also offer a great kind of snapshot of someone that broke from our area and was able to really dig into the dirt and experience a little bit more nature. So excited to have both of our presenters this evening. And are we gonna go directly to the video, Eleanor, or, okay, great. So stay with us. This was a pre-recorded kind of presentation, and then we'll kick it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor and Equal Action Arlington, for inviting me to be a part of a timely and exciting lecture series highlighting biophilia, our connection to nature, not only in our homes, but in the surroundings and spaces we inhabit. It goes without saying that if there was one positive outcome of the pandemic quarantine has revealed to us, is that people have a deep and essential yearning to connect with nature in some form, any form. I would like to ask everyone to think about where you sought refuge in the outdoors during this pandemic. And as a way to share your experience with one another, please add it to the chat. Chances are there will be similarities in the types of places where we find solace. I personally look to explore spaces that slowed us down due to the sheer amount of beauty, rich in context and texture, piquing senses, bringing forth a certain kind of calming comfort. As a society, we have sought to discover and go where one could immerse themselves and pull away from the noise of the urban world, like a child walking in a creek or woods amongst the enormous life that washes over them. I look forward to sharing with you how integrating natural elements and processes through landscape design can bring us closer to the wonders and experiences we desire from our urban communal spaces and even in our personal gardens. As a horticulturist who morphed my obsession of love of plants into design through landscape architecture, I have always seen my contribution to creating a meaningful space through the art of planting design. Plants are tangible living tools that create landscapes that can form memories and experiences. Good planting design can stimulate every human sense and emotion possible, luring you back to discover more each visit. My landscape philosophy stems from my childhood upbringing in West Africa with a family poultry and tropical crop farm business, but also living amongst trees and plants that shaded and screened your home while also bringing forth an abundance of harvestable fruit. This is where I learned that plants have a functional role well beyond looking good. It's through this lens that as a designer, I view the role of planting design in the design process as a connection to nature, to encourage that deeper level of connectivity to a more wild and unexpected outdoor experience in our parks and open spaces. I lean on the seen and unseen functional processes that intentionally pair materials to support one another into a biodiverse, intertwined approach, to shape spaces that go beyond the baseline of a gray to green solution, but also support sustainable practices to meet the triple bottom line and address climate change. In looking at the nature connection provided in several Arlington County parks, I always ask myself, how are the five senses engaged? What is the one that you can feel or touch? What can you see or hear, smell? What can be tasted? I like to ask, if we build a more diverse space with small scale plant communities, will they, all living creatures, come? For over 25 years, McCoy Park sat as an all-lawn sloping park with aged trees and overgrown edges, a remnant piece of land next to I-66. That green slope in itself is a welcomed green space relief from surrounding buildings and roads. Limited seating does not encourage users to appreciate the calming green vista beyond, nor does the slope provide usable space. As one moved through the walkway, there wasn't the ability to hear or feel the landscape. The park was transformed into a small community gathering space and gateway into the neighborhood by removing a small footprint of traditionally mowed grass and to add materials that brought the space to life. A wood deck with comfortable seating was implemented with a shade cover to keep cool during sunny and warm days. The deck platform creates a level space, allowing single or group users to orient their views towards the open green slope beyond. The addition of flowering understory trees are sprinkled along the woodland edge to enhance the views while increasing new native canopy to the edges. The planting design hugs the deck to create a partially intimate space of shrubs and herbaceous plants that embrace and screen the seating from the roadway. New plants and planted slope uphill from the sidewalk also guide you through the walkway. Natural boulders cut into the landscape to hold back soil and the grade change while accentuating the edges of the planted areas. Plants gently spread into the crevices of the nooks and cranny boulders as they would in a natural setting, creeping to pockets of cool, moist soil to spread their roots along with deeper grass roots to stabilize the slope. The plant heights transition from a low habit to slightly towering over you to be immersed and comforted while seeding, putting flowering perennials, seed heads, textures, foliage, bees, butterflies, birds, and more at your eye level. The plant beds absorb the natural runoff of the site to provide natural irrigation for the specific selection of hardy plant species to thrive. Sun-loving plants provide seasonal interest of blooms and colors that attract pollinators and birds and the occasional rabbits. The sheer nature of the deck, providing a place to sit amongst the trees and plants, has made this pocket park a favorite spot for all who encounter it on bike or foot. Through thoughtful material choices and placements, the park is inviting, bringing the user into the landscape, while building a place for community to enjoy and gather. Over at Oakland Park, a well-loved tree canopy and grass park had the opportunity to upgrade its features and bring in some unique art and a new landscape vision. The beautiful natural wood art structure encouraged a new take on planting that would emphasize the tree existing canopy and rethink former lawn edges into planting beds, transforming them into artistic spaces in themselves. Two distinct planting zones were considered for the lawn transformation. The first was a partially screened sunny meadow inspired edge to pull the eye from the sidewalk into the space over lush plantings. The second approach was to remove the lawn from under establishing trees with a cool and lush shaded planting scheme adjacent to a new walkway and seating area. The removal of the lawn decreased the nutrient competition with the willow oaks, and the added perennials function as a green mulch to protect the roots of the trees and the soil beneath, capturing and holding moisture, cooling the soil temperature and the ambient air, keeping the ambient air cool. This also meant a sizable amount of the park no longer warrants traditional maintenance via mowing, and trees are less susceptible to mower damage. The tapestry of colors and textures sinuously placed allows for a fluid visual connection for the park user to pause and rest their eyes versus looking directly onto a busy roadway beyond the sidewalk. Even the decking to match the wood art slows the foot traffic and begs for you to stay a while. The plants and beds act as a transitional visual and auditory buffer between the roadway traffic and the serene park. A traditional flowering tree canopy was added throughout the open sunny green spaces, along with wooden benches within and amongst the tree canopy. The renovation of athletic facilities typically results in landscape that is geared towards active use, trees, and grass. The renovation of the courts of Virginia Highlands allowed for the different take on the former concrete and grass aesthetic, making a simplified planting approach that visually and physically transforms the movement between the courts. The simple but bold planting treats the walkway as an urban plant alley condition that partially screens the courts from the walk and vice versa. It adds plants with structural form, textural motion, and sound qualities that can tolerate and welcome reprieve in an otherwise challenging concrete condition. The addition of shade coverings and seating amongst the alley walk create a space to rest and rejuvenate while moving through a more enjoyable experience than the former condition. Plant selection included native species responding to runoff from the courts, adaptive to the pre-existing flood conditions of the park, in addition to the sunny orientation. Plant selections emulate the movement and energy of sports with plants that sway and rustle in the wind while having striking fall hues. The seasonal qualities of the plants were chosen to make a pleasant year-round scene through the park. The future area that would become the project's bioretention is an example of a feature that has multiple functions. The bioretention captures runoff and protects the park from flooding, while it also is a functional native plant habitat friendly amenity, which from season to season transforms in nature, shape, color, and habitat while providing food and hosting sources for pollinators. You may see bioretention as rocks or planted as grass, but when designed with wet and dry tolerant herbaceous species, benefiting bird and pollinator populations, it can truly become a moment of ecological and aesthetic function. The habitat benefiting from the alley walk and bioretention plants also has a new function in the garden to enhance the taste for the human user by being a supporting landscape for the recent demonstration garden by the Arlington Friends of Urban Agriculture, partnered with Arlington County, looking at how small spaces and communities can introduce urban agricultural practices as a learning tool about the environment and food system. This brings me to share some of the exciting edible landscapes and urban agriculture projects that have come out of the GW graduate design course that I have taught, focusing on the overall functionality, productivity, and aesthetics and goals of creating edible landscapes for communities. These projects showcase how communities truly embrace creating an urban agriculture example that provides the social, economical, and environmental benefit through the introduction of a communal food space. The Dale Street Gardens in the city of Alexandria began as an open understory grassy area nestled within multi-dwelling units and duplex homes, adjacent to an elementary school across from a city playground within one of the lower income and multiculturally diverse neighborhoods in town, the Arlandria community. The need for a community garden was cited in the 4 Mile Run Master Plan to address the areas of fresh food access barriers while also filling the void of a community garden need in this part of town. The city and GW students created conceptual ideas that could include spaces for compost and storage, shaded seating, areas for demonstration amongst individual plots, all in an aesthetically accepting configuration. There were also ideas for open areas for an adjacent orchard, a children's learning and play space about food production and sustainable agriculture, and spaces for classes for the community to gather, all within this same parcel. The end result was the confluence of design ideas with the city and built in partnership with local businesses to create a unique community garden that gives so much more than food. The mission of the Dale Street Community Garden is to support and enhance the social capital, food security, and health of the local community through gardening. The community garden is a volunteer-run program in tandem with the city. And in addition to rental plots, there are plots specifically for demonstration, agricultural and horticultural education, and some of the food grown in the non-rental plots are identified for donation to local food banks. The open lawn areas have become a space for community health and wellness programs, such as yoga in the garden for local residents and for spaces for non-neighborhood residents as well. The garden beds come in various sizes and allow for ease of access and movement into the garden. Edges of the garden are used for ornamental and flowering plants, important to providing additional pollinator and supporting beauty and aesthetics to the garden. The demonstration beds are used as a central space to inspire and educate. Aesthetics was critical to the success of the garden, and the layout really helped keep that balance while gardeners get to tend deeply with their soil in their individual plots. The sheer act of transforming a grassy area into a space that grows food as a life source that depends on soils, insects, organisms is pretty powerful. Pulling in the human user to learn to tend and observe and rest transcends the space into an ecological system of its own that supports the community's needs to support, educate, gather, grow, and empower. The Grow Garden at GW was an idea from a Food Justice Alliance student organization partnering with the graduate design program to create a place to learn about education, to provide food for the community on campus. The area of land identified was a mulch-filled planter strip between a sidewalk and a building wall. The site was the perfect opportunity to show how food justice starts from the ground to get those in need while connecting the community's students and faculty, neighbors to be a part of the growing space as well. The project was also the start to showcase sustainable agricultural practices on small pieces of land to support the organization's goal to grow organically. An organic design which partnered storage, compost, water collection, refuse material, shade fruit trees, flowering edges, and rotational crop beds was selected as the base for the GW Grow Garden. This creation of the garden, a volunteer-funded and built project, gave the community hands-on experiences to shape the garden from the ground up. Students and staff cut, dug, hauled, and joined together to work to build the basis of the space. The process built relationships between the Foggy Bottom and GW community, all in the name of growing organically for justice purposes. The garden was transformed over the last 10 years in form, but has continued to be an anchor in the GW community as a leading food landscape program. Volunteer hours keep the garden growing and tended, and exploring and implementing different organic methods to support the garden. The Grow Garden is a wonderful example of a learning and living, functioning farm lab in an urban setting that has become a space nourishing not only the body, but the minds of those who engage the garden. The landscape is teeming with life, and food harvested from the garden is donated to Miriam's Kitchen in DC. Beyond food justice and donation, the Grow Garden has been instrumental in bringing fresh foods to the cafeterias, working to get the other two GW campus food initiatives on campus, and to also introduce beekeeping on the Mount Vernon campus, as well as working to create birdhouses for different parks throughout the campus. They are also working as advocates to increase and bring more food and health nutrition focused courses and workshops for students on campus. Last, the Food Justice Alliance has also worked with Fresh Markets to bring student affordable CSA options to campus. Last, I want to share how I personally have created my home landscape to function as a place for play, rest, food, habitat, all while working with the site to capture and reuse materials and energy to create my own personal oasis. What began as an all-lawn, steep sloping landscape did not leave much to be desired, but we saw the potential in transforming a slope into a series of rooms and garden spaces that work together. We create a place of respite and joy to create a memory and educate and learn from while building community with those around us. The first cut to our yard within the slope naturally was for food production, and the natural drainage to feed the garden was going to be our saving grace. Pots were introduced to grow without committing to their placements. The first garden would evolve over 12 years to be the anchor and central space in our yard, pushing edibles throughout every corner of the property. The slope eventually became terraces, using the gravity of the site to our advantage. The overall slope of the rest of the yard became a terrace garden for all plant types and spaces, including lawn areas for gathering and play, and perennial and pollinator beds to support food growth and introduce supporting habitat. I practice what I preach and apply ideology and principles from sustainable design, horticulture, permaculture, and ecological agricultural practices into the overall experience in the garden. Observing, capturing energy sources, interplanting, layering, and protection soil, and making micro ecosystems within themselves. And of course, a lot of edible plants that also offer traditional plant functions, such as shade, hedges, walls, vines, and more. I found using pots were a nice way to start to add plants and edibles in our yard, even if we didn't have a lot of land. Pots allowed for fun experiments with so many plants through trial and error, and even resulting in bountiful harvest. With seasonal and flowering combination working wonders. We also grew papaya, lemongrass, sweet potatoes, annual flowers, all to add colors, bees, and eventually harvesting a variety of bounty that we could barely keep up with over a while. We also looked at including peanuts and potatoes in bags. And grew medicinal herbs and lavender to help soothe the pebble walkway. We even included our pomegranate to anchor the house and allow for a pleasant transition from the front yard to the side yard, all while hypnotizing us during hummingbird season. We let blackberry edges give us enough for July fruit and also share some for the birds. The wealth of diversity is never ending and allows my family and I to break away and explore and discover something new every day, every season in the garden. The edible trees added shade, fruit, and stunning fall color. They also allowed us to share our abundance with family, friends, and neighbors, old and new. Our garden has always incorporated ornamental native planting areas to welcome insects and birds, breaking up the Virginia clay soil, stabilize an even terrain, and also support our edibles for pollination. Though it started small, the ornamental perennial plants over time would eventually become an urban meadow backdrop for the fruiting trees, our gathering areas, and the long grassy edges. Each space of the garden was added with intentional purpose to support the overall use of our garden and how it's a pure extension of our home as a place to seek refuge, solace, especially during the last year. No matter how much space you have, starting small can truly be magical to introduce nature into your personal life. I think one of the best outcomes of our home garden and being intimate with plants around us has been the beautiful connection that our young children have had with every kind of plant, bug, and garden experience possible. They have seen a lot of beauty and up-close excitement of the players that can make and break a gardener's heart. They tasted so many flavors of new and old crops. They have learned to take pause and listen to birds and bee melodies, and even in the evening, the humming of the bats. They become a part of the harvest and growing process by cutting, digging, creating, and exploring, and they unknowingly seal their minds with the perfume of lavender as they run by it and the sweet smell of ripe, rotting fruit. Needless to say, adding and introducing all the elements of growing food and supporting plants for the mouth, the soul, and the mind will hopefully become part of their landscape memory DNA to always want to seek the comforts of a world that captures every sense of their imagination and pulling them closer to the world. If you want to connect to food specifically and do not have a yard, a deck, or a community plot, start with volunteering at local farms, supporting farmers markets, and getting to know your local farmers like the next speaker, Carolyn of Duggan Farms. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And we've got some great questions, which again, I will hold until post presentation so we make sure that we have sufficient time. But yeah, I'm excited and inspired. So without further ado, though, I will kick it over to Carolyn to go ahead and present her work.
Thank you. And thanks so much for having me today. This is exciting. What a great presentation that was. It's kind of fun to look back and see some areas I recognized from, you know, the surrounding DC and Arlington and Alexandria areas. I got actually my master's from GW, so I was familiar with some of that and had never seen that they had turned it into a food garden. So that was pretty exciting. So my name is Carolyn Quinn, and I own Duggan Farms, which is a small produce and cut flower farm in the Northern Neck of Virginia. For those of you that might not be familiar with the Northern Neck, it's located just about 2.5 hours sort of south and east of the Northern Virginia area. If you come down 301 through Waldorf and go over the nice bridge, and then at Dahlgren, you sort of turn east and head until you can't go any further. We're right on the Chesapeake Bay, and it's a beautiful, beautiful rural area. And I discovered it sort of coming down as a weekender, or actually just got introduced to the area and then became a weekender down here, and fell in love with it immediately and started scheming for how to stay in the area, for a while. So I was doing kind of the back and forth. And as I was spending my weekends down here, gardening became my therapy, really, for sort of dealing with the Washington life, and spent more and more time learning about compost and growing and all sorts of things. And there's a very strong gardening community here. And so I started to sign up for more classes and was sort of doing some exploration both in DC and in the Northern Neck. And that led to my obsession and ultimately to having a farm. So we'll go to the next slide if I could, Eleanor. She's going to be oh, there we go. I need my slide. Do I need to push anything? Oh, I think in the next.
Yeah, keep talking, Carolyn. The computer's freezing, sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. So you're going to see a little overview of my farm. Oh, somebody said, hi. An overview of my farm. It's an aerial shot in a slide. And it's basically when very quickly after I first bought the property, it was quite empty. But it's a 8-acre property. I only grow on about 2 acres. I grow really intensively. Oh, this is perfect. Thank you. So this is where my farm market started. So I had bought a piece of land because I lived in a homeowners association and they wouldn't allow me to plant a garden of any size. They kind of fought me on beekeeping. They wouldn't let me have chickens. So I finally bought a little slice of land and started growing, and then decided I was going to try this as a full-time, living and see if I could make it. And I still get, as I say, sweaty palms when I look at this slide, because this was day one when I drug a picnic table out to the end of the driveway and put up my little signs, and I had my cooler with eggs in it. And somehow I thought I was going to make a living off of this. And lo and behold, it worked, but I still get a little nervous when I look back on it. So this was day one in 2015. So it was April 18th of 2015. So anyway, that was the start of what became what is now known as Duggan Farms. So you can go to the next slide, Eleanor. So the overview that you're going to see is an aerial shot of the farm. Like I said, it's about 8.5 acres, but I only grow on 2 acres. And we grow everything really intensive. So by that, I mean, we plant every plant 6 inches apart. So on 2 acres, you can grow a tremendous amount of food. We grow principally, we won't grow certain things that take a lot of space, like sweet corn or sweet potatoes or anything that really requires space. Thank you. This is it. So you can see where my house is right in the middle there, and the front 2 acres that are on either side of the driveway, that's actually where the principal farm is that grows. To the side of my house, I think the view that you would be looking at to the right side, we now have a 1/4 acre of blueberries on that side of the house, and on the left side of the house where those outbuildings are, we now have about 12 fig trees that are kind of finally coming into shape. Everything from behind my house that you can't see much, where it's still got some clearing and some trees, that is going to be converted into a native plant walking paths and educational area, because there's no growing possibility as far as produce back there. I live on really, really low-lying land, and so you can't plant produce in that area, but you can plant some stunning natives that take that type of soil beautifully. So we're really excited. I'm really excited to start developing that. In the next slide, it's a little bit jarring. I know we suddenly like change locations, change views, change seasons, but this is a very current picture. This is January of this year. And just to give you a little better perspective of how quickly the farm has grown, you can still see my house in the middle, and those front 2 acres are where we grow on the farm. But the middle, in the sort of the middle of the picture, is 2 high tunnels, which look just like greenhouses. Those are grants from USDA. They're high tunnels that they pay you to, or they pay for, to extend the season of small farmers. So we can grow year round in those tunnels. And because of that, we can actually keep our market open year round. So we used to be, you know, kind of an April to October market, and now we're a 12-month market. You can see the building in the front with the green doorway. It's an open air pole barn, basically, and that's our market now. So no more picnic table. We graduated off the picnic table onto a little veggie stand, and then ultimately in 2018 built this building. So it's about 1,100 square foot. It allows us to have refrigeration and freezer space, which also allows us to partner with a whole lot of other farms to sell their, you know, produce and livestock and cheeses and milk and all sorts of things. So we have about 32 partner, you know, farms and other small artisans that sell through the market. And then on either side of the market building are pergolas, and that's where our nursery is that we have as well. And we specialize in native plants. So that's sort of everything that you see in the front is the active farm, and everything in the back of the picture behind the house is where we're going to do more of the native plantings. So next slide, thanks. So this is, I just wanted to, you know, shock you at what a dumb thing this was to be getting into. Again, I was kind of just going back and forth on the weekends at this point, but I decided I was going to buy this, and I was just going to use the house as a shed, you know, to have some growing. But this is sort of what it looked like when I first purchased it. So it was a huge process. I ended up gutting the house, and now I live in the house. So that was fun to do. Next slide. So this is about 2 years into it. So the first thing I needed to do was start to rejuvenate some of the soil. I have really, really wet, heavy clay soil, not particularly good growing soil because it just doesn't aerate very well. So I use a lot of cover crops. And in the upper left corner, as I'm looking at it, is crimson clover. And it's a wonderful cover crop that's planted in the fall. And it basically springs this time of the year, or that blooms this time of the year in April, and really helps to get the nitrogen levels back in. It's just a fabulous cover crop for helping rejuvenate the soil. Plus it holds the soil in place over the winter. You'll see next to it is sunflowers. That is my primary cash crop, and it also happens to be a really good crop for the soil. The sunflowers will take out toxins, do all sorts of wonderful things. These are actually pollenless sunflowers, so you will see the bees on them, but the bees don't get a lot of nutrition out of it. Basically, we're cutting them so fast. Sunflowers are specifically grown for cut flowers, so they don't drop a lot of pollen onto your table after you cut them. But then you can see some of the flowers, and I had chickens for a while. I no longer have any chickens. I've decided I needed to sort of focus on the produce and the flowers and let other folks raise animals better than I do. They were a ton of fun, but also a ton of work and a lot of heartache because they would get eaten a lot. We had lots of predator issues. And that's always a challenge, but it was a lot of fun having them. Next slide. So this is one of the first years I was so lucky. I put a call out to the community. My biggest goal with having the farm was really to kind of build a community and see if there were other folks that had such a passion for growing in the area. And sure enough, found a ton of folks that for all sorts of reasons either couldn't access the soil themselves or just wanted to be in partnership with others. Folks just came out and were so helpful. The whole farm ran really off of community support and volunteers for about 3 to almost 4 years. We still have volunteers that come once a week and work in the fields. But anyway, this is us at the second little veggie stand that we had. All right, next one. In the honor box, you'll see in the bottom corner, for the first 2 years, because it was just myself, I couldn't be out manning my vegetable stand. So I put out an honor box, and that was how I made all my money in 1s and 5s. And I am fortunate to live in a place where you can do that. Nobody, I always got more money in the box than I should have. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, next slide. These were some of just the backbone of folks that came out to support the farm. A lot of these folks were, newly retired, had just moved to the area, wanted to be a part of it. In the lower right is a gal, Debbie, who had worked at an organic farm in Tennessee for years and came to volunteer, and was an absolute dream, taught me so much. That was probably the most exciting thing about having the community really support the farm. Was I was learning and continue to really, but everybody brings so much knowledge to it. So it was a real sharing of knowledge of how to do, how to grow certain crops, how to do it sustainably. We are not certified organic, but we use organic methods. So, any sort of pest control and all of that, it's a lot to learn at one time. And Debbie happens to be my driver now. So we have a big van, and we, go different farms to pick up other people's products. And she's still my driver today. So she's awesome. All right, next one. And then we reached out, we participated in a program called WWOOFers, which is the Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. I probably just killed that, but it's about that. And they are typically young people, but anybody can do it. I'd encourage you to look into woofing if you want to do some travel when we're all allowed to do that again. You basically sign up, you go work on an organic farm, and you work for room and board. So these young folks would come and live in my house with me, and they'd give me a day's work. And, usually they stayed for a couple weeks at a time, and they were just fabulous. Their energy was incredible. And I learned so much from all of them, and I still keep in touch with them all. They were amazing young people. And that's Doug, of course, in the bottom. He always has to sneak into these pictures. All right, next. And then we have, of course, excuse me, lots of programs that run through the farm. Summer camps come through. The kids are just great. It's funny because I look at this picture now, and a lot of these kids are almost entering high school, it seems like now. They just grow up so fast. But they got to, plant pumpkin plants and all sorts of seeds. They helped in the garden. It was hilarious. They would walk through the garden and immediately want to pick a cucumber and start eating it at that moment. And of course, the story always was, they never eat these vegetables at home, but as soon as they were in the garden, they just loved to do it hands-on. They got to ride around on the tractor and do all sorts of fun activities. So a lot of these kids, excuse me, have come year after year. And like I said, now they're in junior high, it seems like, or high school. And then we had a few young kids that took on their own farming ventures with either chickens or growing a certain crop. And we'd always make sure to buy their produce and highlight them as they were successful. All right, next. I love seeing those kids. And this was our second iteration of what our market looked like. So this was a little veggie stand. This was Sweet Natalie that worked for me for several years. And it was a really cute little air-conditioned stand. And we thought when we built it, oh, it's going to be so big, we'll never be able to fill it up. And before you know it, it was overflowing. And our aesthetic, my aesthetic is, I think produce is beautiful. I think flowers are beautiful. I think everything should be displayed beautifully. So we're not a typical farm market. We don't just put rows and rows of, different vegetables out. We like to intermix it and try to, give ideas to people. We just like it to be beautiful, frankly. It's a little extra work, but it's really fun to do. And everybody's mesmerized when they come in, and it helps people buy more food or buy more produce. So that's our theory. All right, next slide. Thanks, Eleanor, for doing this. So this is getting a little bit closer to current day. What we think about, we have a sign in the farm market that hangs, as you can see it there, welcome to Duggan Farms. Now seeding, now planting, now harvesting. And what we're trying to do with, sort of gentle signs like that is to really help folks understand that we're always thinking 3 months ahead, and we're always selling seasonal produce. So, typically you're not going to walk into our market in April and find corn or, whatever season it is. We sell what's in season right now. So right now you're going to find a lot of greens and just a few little starts of some other, of course, radishes and turnips and all sorts of things. But we move with the seasons, and this board kind of helps explain to the public what that looks like in real time and sort of what they can count on in the future. And we always tell people when it's in season, gorge yourself, eat everything you can, and then just put it down for a little while, and move on to the next thing. Asparagus isn't so important that in December you need to get it from Peru. Just wait till April. It'll be here and it'll be local and it'll be wonderful. Down the left corner is Manuel, who is a gentleman from Honduras that lives on the property now. He is a green card holder and lives on the property 10 months a year, is just wonderful, is hilarious, and keeps us all running. Next to him, Stephanie is another farmer that's kind of working with me part-time right now while she's growing her own farm. And then we have just lots of other folks that are in and helping us out. We grow a lot of flowers, like I said, in the summer particularly, and then our produce is sort of more in the spring and the fall. We're real heavy in produce. The next slide, please. And like I said, I do grow, we are not certified organic, but we do grow with sustainable methods. What that means is no chemical fertilizers, no chemical pesticides. We use a lot of compost in the garden. Mushroom compost is principally what we focus on. We use water very carefully. We just do drip irrigation. We're right up close to the Chesapeake Bay, so any sort of agricultural runoff is incredibly important in our area, and we try to be very we just this year, for the first time ever, we'll finish a style of growing that we're now actually not going to have any heavy equipment in our front acre farms anymore. So we've eliminated the need for a tractor, which is really nice. It sort of just takes all the heavy equipment and soil compaction out of it, and now we have beds that are stable, and we can just rejuvenate them by hand, which is lovely. Next slide, and I'll just try to go as quickly as I can through the last ones. I know we're probably running over. We work with a lot of different vendors, folks who are either artisans, growers, they raise livestock, they raise produce. For a long time, it tended to be almost all female. I don't know why. It seems like middle-aged women tend to love to change careers and get into growing. So there's a lot of us that have small farms and a really, really good network of folks out doing this type of thing. Next slide. And these are just some pictures. We can go through these pretty quick. But we just, like I said, we really focus on beauty in our market, just to make sure that, the best foot is placed forward, and everybody knows how gorgeous both produce and flowers can be if they're grown locally and without chemicals. We just opened our nursery this past year. This is really our first full year doing it. We are specializing in native plant and pollinator-friendly plants. And we always say, plant in the fall if you can, because nature will do its work for you. And we have a lot of butterfly or milkweed here, and butterfly weed, other things. So next slide. And this is just as we move through the season. So now we're into the fall. We do a big fall sale every year. We started it last year with the Native Plant Society, where they come and bring some of their own plants. We grow natives. The whole community turns out, and it's a really big special moment where our focus is just getting as many native plants into the landscape as possible. And we feel like it's not just a once a year. We try to share that message all year, but we really do a big effort in the fall to get that out. And I think that's getting, yeah, okay. So this is my contact information. That's the website for the farm if anybody wants to get online and check us out. Of course, we're on Instagram and Facebook. And we're not far away, so we would encourage you, if you ever get a chance, to please come and visit, and also just encourage your continued love of getting out and getting your hands in the dirt. Before I started my farm, I volunteered at another farm just to learn more about it, and it's just it's invaluable experience, but it's also incredible how sharing folks are that are in this industry or in this group. There's sort of no secrets, and there's people just want to see others be successful with their growing. So I would encourage everybody to get out and meet as many folks that are doing this kind of thing as possible. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Wow. I feel like my gardening needs to, in general, step it up a little bit, both from an aesthetic standpoint as well as what's being produced. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. And also thank you to everyone that was helping moderate the chat. A lot of the questions that came through for Carolyn were answered by the community. So thank you for taking some of that burden off me and the questions. So we've got just a couple minutes. I'm going to run through questions real quick. And if you have additional ones as we go through questions, please put them in the chat and I will direct them accordingly. So again, thank you to both of our speakers. I really appreciate the time and presentations today. Jeanette, a couple questions to you first. Again, the team did a great job of moderating. Regarding Oakland Park, it looked like there was a lot of impermeable surfaces there. the walkways, etc. And Audrey was curious if water was being routed to any of the beds or drains.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of those sites where a lot of our park sites, the water has to stay on the site, so it cannot go off site. So the water is feeding back into irrigating the lawn naturally, and then it pushes into both of the planting beds, the one adjacent to the art sculpture, and then the sunny bed side as well. So all the site water gets fed right back into the site. Absolutely.
Great. And then Carolyn did a good job of highlighting kind of ways to get involved with her farm, but there's also a tremendous amount of interest in ways to volunteer here in Arlington. Maxwell had a question specifically around Arlington Forest, volunteering, doing plant swaps. We might actually do some version of a plant swap, so stay tuned on that. Yeah, just curious if there are, ways to get involved, particularly with Arlington and in the community here.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I see Audrey had added some information in the chat, which is great. I've met Audrey and David and a few other of the Friends of Urban Agriculture group at different occasions through my time at the county. But that is one group I feel that is really valuable just to connect with and to see the kind of work that they're doing through the Friends of Urban Ag. And also even through AFAC for just wanting to know how to help other community members with donating food and so forth. I know that there's sort of a big faith farming is a term that I had coined years ago, a movement where lots of different religious organizations, churches as well, are growing for the greater good for the community. So there's different ways to get involved, but I think really working with your network between the Friends of Urban Agriculture and through AFAC would be some of the best ways to connect. And also just sort of finding out what the master gardeners are also doing, because sort of all these different elements are intertwined with one another. So I think there's lots of great opportunities in Arlington, and Arlington has a really rich base of knowledgeable individuals and passionate individuals. I think that you'll find you are not alone in wanting to explore these ideas and support the community.
Thank you. There's been a bunch of questions regarding permaculture design, whether we can actually have permaculture here in our very small gardens, whether they be patio gardens or in my little backyard over here. I'm curious if you can demystify that for us.
Absolutely. I think when you think about, the term permaculture and what it really, the three pillars, it's really about care of earth, care of people, and also thinking about how to share or reinvest your surplus and your abundance within your community. And I think there's lots of different and really applicable principles from permaculture that can be applied at any scale. And it's really thinking about how to create small ecosystems and little habitats within themselves. Even through, if you have a patio or a deck, you can think about, well, what if I used my fallen branches and smaller pieces to actually build the soil and have it decompose, so I don't have to irrigate my plants more. And those are small techniques as well that you can apply. And that's an ideology of hugelkultur that I believe Jim was talking about that he does on his farm at West Virginia. But I think absolutely some of the basic, even simplified ideas of interplanting and rotating and layering plants. You can imagine if you have a townhouse frontage and you wanted to have one fruit tree, well, that one fruit tree can still be planted with bulbs and with perennials and with with vines and other plant materials that all work together to mimic and reflect the natural processes of a food forest, or how the different layers of a forest can work together. So I don't think anything is too small, and I think there's many different principles that can be applied at all different scales, and it's worth exploring as well. I think, yeah, there's so much you can do and what you can take away based on your spatial availability as well. And even something as simple as collecting your own rainwater and capturing it, or utilizing your slope to really rethink how you capture water. I mean, in my personal yard, all the small raised beds, I mean, we couldn't afford to buy a bunch of compost or anything of the sort. So all the waste, the compost just got dumped in And over time, we just buried it so that it became the resource and the reserve for nutrients. And funny story is that when we first bought the property, there was only one tree on the site, which was a flowering cherry. And the former owner had cut every fruit tree down before because they thought it would sell their property better. But we ended up digging that first small little slope bed, and it literally looked like a coffin in the middle of our property of just compost building up for the first 4 or 5 months, and eventually became the richest part of the yard. So I mean, you can really apply some of these principles in so many ways. And I think some of the attendants have also put some links of different permaculture practices, but there's a lot of ways you can really start to apply it.
So thank you for that. So we're coming up on time. Last question for the both of you. I think, again, we've got obviously a very active community here that's super interested in this topic. And I appreciate everybody chiming in with additional kind of ping pongs and suggestions to go check this out and check that out. It's really how our community educates itself and gets better. So thank you. There was a question regarding access to your presentations. If not to put you on the spot, but if you're comfortable with that, Eleanor can send that out post, just so everybody had access to it that was here today. And again, a quick silent but virtual round of applause for both of our speakers. Thank you again. This was fantastic and has only inspired me to get out there and get dirty. So I encourage all of you to do the same. And one quick reminder, this is part of a series. We have a few additional events coming up. Our Eco Action Arlington Extravaganza event is coming up. We've got some Earth Day events. There's lots of ways to get involved as well. And Eleanor has us to close out. So before you jump off, please hang on 1 second while Eleanor closes us out. And thank you again.
Thank you, Chris. So I wanted to again thank Chris for moderating our speakers, Jeanette and Carolyn. And then this series is put together by a planning committee. So I do want to thank all the amazing people who have helped plan our Love Our Living World series starting back in October, and which will be culminating in June. So as Chris mentioned, I did want to kind of let you know what's coming next. So please do keep in touch with Eco Action Arlington. We love to see you. As Chris mentioned, we are in the middle of our Earth Month fundraising challenge. So if you give now through, that should say April 30th, every dollar you give will be matched, and any gift is appreciated no matter how small. We're trying to raise $15,000. I did want to note that we have an upcoming cleanup, but unfortunately it is at capacity. We are following special rules for COVID. So unfortunately our service projects, we can't always take as many people as we'd like. And then looking ahead into June, we will be holding our annual Green Home and Garden Tour virtually this year. So this will be a nice follow-up to this event. A chance to talk to many homeowners throughout Arlington who've done sustainable practices in their home or have created green homes and or with solar photovoltaics. So this will be a virtual event during lunchtime on Friday, June 4th. Our third annual Eco Extravaganza will be on Thursday, June 10th, and we are planning a pre-event social in the Bluemont Park, which will be tentatively on Thursday, May 27th. And then our last service project of the spring, bringing into summer, will be our solstice celebration, where we'll be taking advantage of the long daylight hours and enjoying our company in Bluemont Park on Friday, June 18th. And this is a chance to meet and mingle, socially distanced, of course, but then also help do some service to improve Bluemont Park. We'll be working in the pollinator garden there, and we'll be also cleaning up trash. So again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you for coming. We're having a wonderful time loving our living world with you, and we look forward to seeing you at our final event on Thursday, June 10th. So thank you and good night.